Welcome to the Animal Control Report. It's me again, Ashley Bishop, and today I have with me
Jerry Hirsch.
Jerry is standing in again for Dan, that lazy bum. I'm kidding. We all need our time off. I talk about that all the time about for how our mental health, we need to not focus on everything for work and do things that are not work related. And so Dan's taking some time, and that's what we need. And we'll actually get into that a little bit today. Um, Housekeeping business, everybody, check out all of our social media. We've got our Facebook, we've got our Instagram, we've got TikTok. Check it all out. Um, in the show notes, we have mine and Dan's phone numbers. If you need to reach out to us, if you want to talk to us about the show, you want to talk to us about your day, you want to talk to us about anything, our numbers are in the show notes. I do want to address briefly something that I'm going to address in the next episode because I fail. Um, I had an email come in about as a response to my statement in our breed specific legislation where I equated um, having the BSL as being racist. And you know what? I got some education on that, and I want to address that further. I want to actually read the email. However, technology is not being my friend this morning, and I can't find it. So we will address that next episode. But in the meantime, I want to apologize for that statement that I made, and we can talk about it further in the next episode. Jerry, how are things in your neck of the woods?
Starting to get cold, so I like that. I mean, living in the desert, you get the boast of, hotter than hot and some nice cold nights. So it's actually a nice 61 degrees this morning.
And you call that cold?
Better than 100
I'm
degrees.
This is true, but I'm sitting at 44 degrees and we walk around in nothing but a sweatshirt.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
No, this morning when I woke up, it was 53, I think, when I woke up to feed some of the animals. So I was walking around in my shorts and tank top.
all right. Okay. All right. Well, that makes me feel a little bit better. I'm not ready for the snow. I don't want snow. I hate snow. I don't know why I live in Wisconsin, to be honest. I hate the cold.
Yeah, that's probably not the greatest place to be calling home.
You know, I've only done it for the last 34 years. It's okay.
It's 34.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about it. So, I kind of brought it up a little bit earlier about mental health, and that's what our episode's going to be about today. Um, we have a great guest on. I got to go to a training with him and listen to his harrowing story, if you will. Definitely brought tears to my eyes at a couple different points. But this man, he knows how to tell his story and how to help others with that. So I'd like to
Nice.
introduce Chris Prohut. He is the law enforcement mental health and suicide. I totally butchered that, Chris. Why don't you tell us what you do and tell us about you?
Hi, everybody. Pleasure to be on the Animal Control Report. Thanks, Ashley, for inviting me, and pleasure to meet you today, Jerry. Suicide prevention trainer, basically, mental health advocate. Um, yes, I appreciate the the harrowing tale. Yes, when I give my presentations, and really, I've been blessed over the past 11 years to give this presentation to over 16,000 law enforcement officers throughout the United States and parts of Canada. And, the presentation is really focused on them. You guys are in the helping profession too, but who takes care of us? So the title of the presentation is Taking Care of Our Own.
Mm. Without, I mean, going into as much of it as you will you kind of tell us a little bit about your story?
Mhm. Sure. And it's interesting. You're like, well, law enforcement, I was a police officer. Why am I on the animal control report? Well, I think we have to talk about how Ashley and I met. Part of my story in getting into law enforcement was I was an animal control officer in Bolingbrook, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, about 45 miles southwest of Chicago. And reflecting on, coming on the podcast, I'm like, okay, I got to remember this was such a long time ago. So I was an animal control officer right out of high school, and we had two full-time animal control officers, and I was the part-time officer. So I worked 20 hours on the weekend, and that was kind of my foot in the door to law enforcement. I ultimately wanted to be a police officer, but did animal control for 2, maybe 3 years. And we can talk about some of those calls, but this was back in the 90s, which I know I'm dating myself. Um, but my story is kind of the end of my career. What happened to me that took my career away from me? So I began my law enforcement career in 1996, and it ended in 2007, 2008. Some of your listeners might remember the Drew Peterson case. That was a large, international case, we'll put it, when Sergeant Drew Peterson, uh, his fourth wife, went missing, and he became the suspect. And because of that, he then became the suspect in his third wife's murder. She drowned accidentally in a dry bathtub. And if you want to catch up, there's a Lifetime story you can watch on it. But it was the cumulative stress of that case and of the press. I was the press information officer when that happened. And I thought it was my job to fix things and that I could kind of dispel rumors and change the perception of my department. And when I couldn't, I failed at that task. My career was very quick. I went from a patrolman to a commander, which was third in charge of our department, in the span of about 13 years. So I was 34. I was a commander of the police department, and our department was about 125 sworn officers. Our population was 75,000, to kind of give you an overall scope. That led to, as you can imagine, the topic that we're talking about: mental health, mental wellness, resiliency. I didn't have the tools that I needed to get me through this crisis, and it was months on end crisis, which landed me in the hospital and ultimately ended my career. And that's it in a nutshell. And we could go into
Fantastic.
obviously specifics, sure.
Tell me a little bit about it, thinking back to your humane officer and animal control days. And can you make some correlations now thinking back to that, to what you did then and the stress that you felt as law enforcement?
Certainly. I think it was about 2 months ago in a neighboring town of where I grew up in Bolingbrook, there was a shooting that occurred. And there was a picture that was taken on the news. This offender shot the family, and it shot the family dogs too. So in this huge crime scene, there's the animal control truck, right? That has to go into a crime scene where people, I'm sure that they secured it and everything, and they were there to retrieve the dogs or whatever they needed to do. But it was, you think, well, maybe I'm generalizing, but animal control, right? You're the dog catcher. You catch dogs and animals, and that's it, right? No, no, no. You go to these crime scenes, and I can recall, now remember, I'm an 18, 19-year-old kid being called out because I had to work the holidays, as I'm sure many of your listeners do, right? And it was Thanksgiving, and the family pet, the dog, it was a big Irish setter, died in the kitchen, and literally the turkey is in the oven, and the family is crying. They just lost their dog. And it we all hear about stresses, and it's a gunfight, it's a shooting. No, that imprinted on me. Wow, at such I'll say a young age, right? To have to not only see the sadness that happened at the family, but I wasn't trained for that. How do you handle now the family who's grieving, and what should we do? How, the empathy, because you don't have those life experiences. So, then you can move on to somebody stole my dog, or, the dog got hit by the car. All these, they're traumas. They absolutely are. And then you move on and on. And then, of course, now you're the police officer. And since you had animal control experience, now you're going to handle all those calls too, because nobody else has dealt with that. Right. And it's
Right,
like this
right.
Yeah.
hands off, kind of mantra. So I can definitely see that that was my introduction into this isn't always fun. It's great to find a lost dog and give it back to their family. It's those are the joyous occasions. That's what keeps us going. But there's also those ones where you're just kind of taken back, like, huh, that call kind of sucked. But where is the outlet? Who can you talk to about that? Right? You're and depending on your department and what that culture is, or if you're integrated with your department or you're a county, do you have anybody that you can say, yeah, I just kind of feel sad for that family and I just want to talk about it? Or do you go on to the next call? Or, you know what, it's just animal control, it's just a dog, right?
Right.
They could play it off
Hmm.
with that kind of gallows humor or make jokes about it. And Ashley, you've seen my presentation where we talk about, an officer that had to shoot a chimpanzee, right? That
Hmm.
could go, into that call sucked, or it could be made fun of. Uh, it's how do you relieve that stress in the correct way, and do you have that support? So I can certainly see, looking back now. Now during that time, I was doing my job. I loved it. It was exciting. What's the next call? But if you get the time to step back, go, wow, there's a lot of calls that I just kind of skipped over, and they really kind of hurt.
Jerry, does your department have anybody that you get to talk to?
Um, one of our corporals, me and him have a good working relationship together. So
Okay.
we kind of bounce things off when we do have those things. But Chris, you touched on a couple different things that kind of just hit home with me. So the dog catcher label, uh,
Hmm.
I've heard that a lot. I mean, my career is still pretty young, but I hear that a lot. Oh, you don't need that. You don't need this. You don't need nobody to talk to. You don't deal with this and this. And it's true. And all most people see is we find that dog, we take it home. But the call
Hmm.
before, they didn't see us picking up the dead dog on the side of the road and having to go inform the owner, hey, unfortunately, we have some bad news for you. So it is, and I'm a big advocate here, not only from my department but in surrounding agencies, and up at the state level that I'm a board member of, is mental health. We are just as much in need of that person to talk to or that release stress as anybody else. And I'm actually in the process of becoming a counselor for mental health and
Nice.
uh,
Oh,
release. So because we don't really have that down in our area for animal control officers. So that's one of my big pushes over the next year is to get that and put my number out there too. Sorry, excuse me. Just like, Dan and Ashley, I want people to call and reach out. My phone's always on. If you had that case that just destroyed you mentally and you need to release it, I'm going to be there for people.
and Jerry, you hit on a point. The peer support that is blossoming throughout law enforcement needs to include the animal control officers. And that's why when I had met Ashley, I was so impressed that they sent the humane officer to crisis intervention training, because everybody is a gatekeeper. There's a program called QPR. It's Question, Persuade, and Refer, and they talk about gatekeepers. Gatekeeper could be a bartender. People go to the bar to self-medicate, and they're spewing them, all their traumas on these bartenders. What do we watch for? Those certain things, and it doesn't matter the origin of the trauma. We're all wired differently, and trauma affects us differently. Each call, you could literally be fine. You have to make that notification, and you're fine. But maybe on the 50th dog that you have to pick up, for some reason, it's that particular case. Now, where's my outlet? Because the whole suck it up attitude, just throw some dirt on it and walk it off days are over. And you going
Mm.
as a counselor to reframe the focus of individuals, because I think a lot of times they get set on, I only have this option. This is the only thing that will work. And you're going to be able to step in and go, no, did you think about it this way? And it could just open doors. And we need animal control officers, humane officers to be healthy in order to give the best service to our customers, our
Hmm.
residents, right? Our coworkers. So I love that your path is going to include that so that you can support animal control officers. That's why peer support works, because we'll talk with another cop. We'll talk with somebody who's walked in our shoes. So
Mhm.
I encourage you to keep on that path, and I guarantee you your phone's going to be ringing.
Which is which is fine. I mean, it's like I reached out to Dan. So after 4.5 years of doing the job, I finally had to do my first humane euthanasia, and I went throughout the day. I was like, okay, I got this. Yeah, it's fine. Part of the job. And then I got home, and it just my dogs were there, my kids were there, and just kind of all hit. First person I reached out to was Dan. I was like, dude, I just need to get this out, let it
Yeah.
go, and talk about it. So
Oh my gosh, Jerry, you said that word talk. In my
Right.
presentation, that is the whole thing. I'm not selling books or some program. I just want you to talk. But Jerry,
mhm.
you're a guy, and guys don't talk, right? We don't talk.
No, we're
We
not
always have to
supposed
have
to.
the advice. We're not
Yep.
supposed to. So put the men in mental health. I have a friend who kind of talks about the men in mental health, so I love it. We have to talk more. That's how we're going to heal ourselves, and that's how we're going to prevent suicide from happening. Talk early and
100%.
often. This isn't just a one deal thing. It could be the next call. And you also hit on another thing where, uh, if a human, uh, passes away, many departments have procedures and who will make that death notification. And there's usually a chaplain, and you don't have to go by yourself. And there's this process. I don't know if there's a process for the dog got struck by a car, and you now have to not only work the scene, but you have to make the notification as well. Like, you're the jack of all trades here. You made a very interesting point. I luckily never had to do that, um, but I can see how that it's a two-pronged thing. You have to cover the whole gamut, and then you're right. You're probably the only one on duty. So after you're done with that, you have to go on to the next call. It's not like they can
Hmm.
give you a break and you know call the whole other team to go handle another call.
Right. Yep.
And it is always something unexpected too. I had a call. This one stuck with me. I was at the Humane Society, and the dispatch sent me to a decapitated dog on the railroad tracks. And I got there, and sure enough, the dog was fully decapitated. Um, I had been chasing that dog the day before and looking for her, and her owners were looking for her. So I had to take that to the owners, which I feel like is a little bit more traumatic. Like, how do you explain to them, hey, hold the bag the right way, or you're going to drop your dog's head out of the bag, you know?
Yeah.
Um, Going back, Chris, to what you said about my department sending me to the CIT training, I had to ask for that.
Okay.
I did have to ask for that. And I encourage anybody out there listening right now, advocate for yourself to get this training. Um, I actually took a case that I had been working. Woman had adopted a dog. Her dog got out and killed another dog. And now I have to declare her dog prohibited dangerous. She can't have her dog because it killed another dog. Um, but this dog was what helped her get out of a domestic violence situation.
Oof.
And so now I have to take that away from her, and she just melted. And so we had to, I was with an officer, and I don't know that he had ever been through the CIT training, just based on his reactions and how he was handling it. Um, so I asked her, can I go upstairs? Can I get you your phone? Can I call anybody for you? She let me call her friend, and I got her friend there to be with her while she was going through this. And then I went back to my department and I said, I want more training. We see these kinds of things all day, every day. Obviously, within our own departments, within our coworkers, but also with the people that we are working with and the things that we have to enforce on these people. Um, the CIT training that we're talking about is through NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. It is a national training. A lot of times it's put on by, for us, it's one of our deputies and then a crisis intervention person. Um, so check it out in your state. See if you can get to it. It's a week-long training. It is absolutely worth it.
A lot of the topics are, medication, how to handle somebody in crisis. I guess it's a lot of empathizing with what people are going on. I don't know if you do like the auditory or
Mm,
hallucination drill and things like that, and then
yep.
they also have scenarios, and then I come in for the 2.5 hours and go, well, you're giving all these resources to other people, the public, because the training, 38 hours of it, is how to best help the public. And then I come in for 2 hours and go, well, what if it's you struggling with depression or anxiety? Will you go and get the same help? Or are you going to face a stigma where you're going to be seen as weak or a liability? Nobody's going to trust you anymore, or you might even lose your job. So, facing all those barriers, of course, I'm just going to suffer in silence and go on to the next call. It's
Yep.
certainly not the way to live.
Yeah. Yeah, Ashley, you hit
You,
on it too. We have to go out and ask for our own trainings. They don't look at us and go,
mhm,
"You need this training."
yeah. My department has regular check-ins. Our officers have regular check-ins with a counselor. They're supposed to check in once a year with her. And I recently made mention to them. I said, you have that for the officers and only the officers. I said, why am I not included? Why isn't our records department included? They have to sit and read all of those reports to redact them. They have
Yep.
to watch all the body cam footage. It is ridiculous that we are not being included with these check ins.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gotten anywhere
100%.
with it yet, but
And there is
yeah.
a trend like Ashley's talking about, those wellness checks. It's either 6 or 12 months. You go in and it's a check-in. It's not an assessment
Mhm.
where you will just talk with a mental health counselor about how are things going. And you're not forced to talk. I've talked to a lot of officers. They go, sometimes I just talk about football because,
Mhm.
I don't want to make this stereotype, but therapy can be scary, right? You're
Yeah.
dealing with these things that you've buried and you don't want anybody to see, and now they have to come up. No, that's okay. I'm not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
I hope that that advantage gets down to the animal control officer level. And you're right, dispatchers and records clerk,
Mhm.
anybody, right? They do thefts, and then all of a sudden they have the biggest case ever, and like you say, they have to watch these body camera footages. Or I talk with dispatchers all the time too.
Yeah.
But I would also encourage you that if there is a large call, where the one I was talking about in Illinois where they shot the family and the dogs, that those animal control officers be involved in any kind of debriefings after, right? Um, there's differences between debriefings and diffusings. But a lot of times these symptoms don't show up till 2 weeks later or a month later. So now what am I supposed to do? So we're also encouraging people to have those counselors ahead of time. Where's the list of counselors? Who do I see? Can I go to peer support that is for the officers? Can I have just an informal conversation, just something? Or if I need professional, what does that look like? Is that employee assistance? How many free visits do I get? Things of that nature. Will it be covered? How do I get time off? all these things to think about before it happens, because when you're in the midst of a crisis, yeah, you're not thinking straight. Who's supporting you?
Hmm.
So very good point,
Right.
Ashley.
Well, and going into the EAP and stuff, most places have that now. So check with your employer, check with HR, somebody like that. They can direct you um, for those free resources. Again, there's people out there, Jerry, me, Dan. We may not be in your area, which might almost be for the better. If you're talking a case to us, we're really not going to be able to know who you're talking about, where you're talking about. You really probably shouldn't be getting in trouble for that, but we're also in the same realm of law enforcement with you.
Hmm.
And you're allowed to talk about that. And
100%. Yep.
so reach out to us. Our information's out there. I know that the Educators of Texas are working on a mental health program as well,
Yep.
so that they can get people trained up, and they're a fantastic resource. Callie, wow, Kelly and Tabitha, um, they are absolutely all about the mental health aspect as well, and
Mm.
I know that they're usually willing to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Those are just some of
And
the resources that I know of.
yeah. And as departments, we need to get better as letting new officers know who those contacts in locally.
Mm,
For the longest time, I'd say probably 3.5 years in mine, I didn't know we had ours is a pastor who comes and can do some talks with us. But I didn't even know we had that available to us until he came to do some morale checks, we called it, with our department.
Nice.
sure. And I think this is going to be a whole lot harder, though, for those of us out there that are not working with law enforcement agencies, right? So we've got plenty of people that were working out of their shelters, or
Hmm.
heck, here in Wisconsin, I got people working out of their homes. They just get called to calls. They might be a part of the sheriff's department. They don't have a desk there, they don't have connections to people there. Um, and so you may have to find your own resources, but like Chris said, do it before you need it so that when you
Yes.
need it, you know where to go.
Right. Yep.
And Ashley, you said NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. I mean, they're nationwide. They have
Hmm.
support groups. They've got webinars that you can learn and find those resources, like you said, ahead of time. And I think that was my biggest downfall is we didn't have those resources in place. Jerry talked about you had a pastor, we had a chaplain program. I just didn't feel comfortable,
Hmm.
and I also didn't feel that anybody would understand the uniqueness of how I felt, which was furthest from the truth. When you start sharing your story or your own struggles with individuals, it will open them up, and then you'll find out that your situation's not so unique. Or, like you guys said, you can share a call that you were on where maybe you felt maybe not exactly the same, but very similar. And then it's like,
Hmm.
really, Jerry? You felt that sadness too? Wow, I thought I was the only one. And that just breaks the mold right there, because now you've made a connection. And
Yep.
it's just that relief of getting rid of that so that you can move forward. But I
Hmm.
had pent it up so much inside that I figured I could handle it. And when I couldn't, that nobody could help me, because heck, I can't even help myself. And in Illinois at that time, if you went to seek treatment in a hospital, they took your gun away from you. It was a state law. And getting that back was like an act of Congress to get it back. So that's ultimately what ended my career. I couldn't get that gun back. And now you're thinking it was, the decision was just quick. It took them like 10 months to figure out that I wasn't going to get my gun back. So we're losing everything at that time. And, I'm not going to say I made the best decisions during that time either. I made terrible decisions during that time. And I don't blame my department at all. Heck, they saved my life. And if you want to hear more about my story, you can go to my website. There's the video. There's about a half-hour video of kind of the intricacies. talktoendstigma.com, which, yeah, we need to talk to end that stigma so that it's okay to get help early. Because if I did talk early and often, maybe I would still have my career. But I realize now, there's a bigger plan. I had to lose my job because sharing my story as many times as I have maybe saved some lives. And that's probably a lot more than I could have ever done on the streets. So that's the silver lining. Yes, I lost everything, but I certainly gained a whole lot as well. So don't be ashamed of your story. Reaching out is absolutely the strongest thing that you can do. It's a sign of strength. And
Right.
there is a paradigm shift that is occurring. I think, and I'm going to generalize this, where people are admitting that they're not okay. We've all heard that tagline, right? It's okay not to be okay. We're missing the part of it's not okay to stay that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
We get people all the time, yep,
Yes.
I'm not okay. Great. What are you doing about it, right? Don't,
Mm-hmm.
because
Right.
we
Yep.
talk about getting stuck, I'm stuck, I'm not moving, nothing's changing. So you have to ask for help. Somebody has to come beside you. You have to call for backup, if you want to call it that, right? So have those resources in place, or have that plan. Look, if I have a bad day, I'm going to call Jerry, or I'm going to call, whomever it is. So have that ahead of time, because when I got out of the hospital, I had that plan. But if I had that plan ahead of time, maybe it would have prevented me from going to the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like what you just
And
said, Chris, about the yeah, you've lost everything, but how many people have you helped being that mental health advocate? That right there could replace anything that, yeah, you might have been able to do with the badge. So you're coming full circle. I look at you're just helping people in another way that is still saving lives.
Right, right. And I've met so many people and traveled to so many different states and so many different stories. And every now and then I'll get an email that's like, hey, I had a rough day. I thought about your story and I reached out and I'm good. Or it saved my career. And I'm just like, yes, okay. That makes all the crap that I went through worth it. And look, I'm nobody special. Everybody has their own story, right? And I talk about this in my presentation. Don't get in the story Olympics. I wasn't involved in a shootout or anything, so I shouldn't feel this way. Because it's easy to see when somebody has a physical, wound. Oh, I could see why, that incident must have hurt. Many of us are walking around without that, right? Or I don't feel I deserve to feel the way that I do. No, own that story. And I think it was an author, Brene Brown, that I read. If you own your story, you get to write the ending. It was something like that, right? Yes, own it.
Yeah.
Because don't try not to play that victim role. Like, look what happened to me. Well, all right, yeah, that happened to me. But resiliency is all about taking that and then making something of it, to turn it
Mm-hmm.
around of, hey, look what happened to me. I took this piece of crap and challenged it up and polished it into gold, and look what I'm doing with it. And that's how you're
Yeah.
going to inspire others. And if we can plow that path forward to make it easier to have more resources now, so that the next person, it's like, oh, I can call NAMI. We have peer support. We've got animal control officers now going to CIT training or whatever. Hey, we've just changed the culture. And how do we do that?
Yep.
We talked. Yep, powerful word.
Yep.
yep. Mentioning back to the emotional Olympics that you were talking about, and that comes back to being kind to yourself when you're like, why is this one bugging me? I've done this how many times before. Um, I'm currently working a case, so I can't go into too many details. But it came down to a puppy that, based on all of her injuries and the severity of them, we had to euthanize her. I, I don't know what it was about that case. Trying not to cry now. That one hit me. I've been doing this for 10 years. And that's 10 years of animal control. I've been in animal welfare for 20 plus. That case has hit me hard. Um, I've done it before. So that one I'm just forging on, and I'm gonna get justice for her one way or another. You know, I'm working with national organizations to make sure that I have all the information I can get. Um, and that's how I'm going to recover from this one, is just knowing that I did absolutely everything for her. But I feel like that's a case that shouldn't have hit me, but it did,
Mhm.
and that's okay.
Hmm.
But again,
Yeah, it
work
is.
through it.
100%. Yeah.
So,
Work through it, get the justice for the dog, and then have your recap with whoever you
and
can have
talk
your
about
recap
it.
with. Yep.
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 I know I've talked to Dan several times about the case because I know that I can. um, he's given me some tips on it, but he's always been there for me to be able to bounce. I don't have anybody else in my area. I am the only humane officer for my jurisdiction. You guys know that. So if I'm struggling to find somebody more local to talk to, so I do. I talk to
Hmm.
Dan. I could reach out to Kelly and Tabitha. I just haven't at this moment, but hey, when I'm down in Texas, I probably will talk to them about it then when I see them, you know, um, talk about it.
We got to get you out to Arizona, Ashley.
We have talked about that.
And
Just
Ashley, I
shameless
like
plug
what you
here. We
said
do
about.
have our annual
Oh, go ahead.
training coming up. So,
Ah, all right. We'll have to talk about it.
yep.
What were you, what were you
Ashley,
saying, Chris?
I like what you said about, you could talk to anybody, and that's a good point to make. There are times when you need a professional counselor, right? And certainly I'm not a professional counselor, and I tell, everybody I talk to, look, I'm just a guy whose life took a hard left. But sometimes that experience and just lending a good ear
Mm-hmm.
can make a difference. And if you are in that position where somebody is coming to you, please know that you don't have to have all the answers. And referral is always, in your pocket. Hey, I'll help you look for a counselor. I'll go with you if you want.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause maybe I could learn something as well. But don't add that to, your pile of stuff that you're going through in life and now believing that, "Oh, I've got to help this friend." You can help them to a point, and then you need to get them to, a professional state, if it calls for
Mhm.
that.
Yep.
Because oh, I've got to be their one and only. No, 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 because that can be detrimental both to you and to the person you're trying to help, right?
That can be traumatizing to you if
Yeah.
you have to listen to it and
Yep.
you are not in a good mental state yourself, and that is a potential trauma to you. Tell your friend, listen, I am here. I want to support you, but I need you to I will help you find
Yes.
somebody else because
Yes.
I mentally can't right now.
Mhm.
And if my friend told me that, the I would trust them so much more because they knew what they needed,
Mhm.
and they were, expressing that and talking about it. And then at that point, maybe you guys do each go, okay, you know what, we both need somebody. And then once you go to that counselor, well, then you can open up to each other because you're both dealing with your traumas at that time,
Right.
Yeah.
but know that you can't fix the world.
Mhm. You have to know your own limits.
Yes.
Yes, boundary
Eh,
setting is very important.
yes. And I bring that back to what I said earlier in the episode about you need to take time away from work. You need to do things that are not work related for you. That is one of the best things that you can do for your mental health, is step away or you're going to burn out.
Mhm.
So, you know, that's something to keep in mind too.
And try to focus on those things that you're grateful for, like, I did get the puppy home, right?
Hmm.
Because you're, like you said, you're going to get that one call that's going to outweigh the 20 wonderful calls that you had. So keep focused. There is positivity. You are doing a good job. I think, I was thinking back, I think animal control calls were the number one calls for service in our department back when I was working. It was the missing dogs and cats. We did wildlife too. I mean,
Mm,
that was like the number one call for service. It was crazy.
yeah.
And, we were going call to call and running. And then you still had to then care for the animals afterwards. You literally had to take
Hmm.
yourself off the street. I'm unavailable. I've got to care for the officers or I'm sorry, the office. Well, you got to care for them too, but you got to care for the animals in the shelter, right? They need food as well. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a big job that I think a lot of people truly understand. And I think that the training you got through CIT helps you understand, when you think about animals, it brought me back to a hoarding case where I
Mhm.
don't know how many cats we removed out of this house. So just the environment that you're in with some of your cases too, you're like,
Yep.
wow, the
Hmm.
things that you
Hmm.
see, right, that you can't unsee.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And smell. You can't unsmell
And
them.
smell, yes, no,
Oh yeah. No.
oh yeah,
You say hoarding, and we all go, "Oh, we know that smell."
that smell,
Yep.
and it doesn't go away. And I, there maybe some of your listeners are like, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, bless you then, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
Yes.
you just haven't found it.
You just haven't found it. So,
Yeah.
It's there.
Just wait.
so
Then they're gonna go, oh, that's what they were talking about on the podcast.
that's
Now I know.
Yep.
exactly. And Jerry, you bring up a good point. There might be individuals who are listening to the podcast and they're going, yeah, and I've never felt depressed or anxious or whatever. So, and I'm just like, okay, just listen. We're just planting the seed. Maybe you're in a great time, but there could be a time in your life, a life stage where things aren't going so great. And then you'll remember that. So even though
Mhm.
it
Hmm.
might not apply to you now, we're just going to plant that seed. And if it never grows, wonderful. Take care of yourself. But
Yep.
in 5 years, you'll be like, I was listening to that podcast and that makes so much sense now. Who
Yep.
do I
Yeah.
call? Right?
Yep.
So, right.
Ghostbusters.
Hmm.
Yes, Ghostbusters.
Sorry.
No, we need to enlighten. Yes, that's where we need to do that. Right? We need to laugh. Right?
Yes.
So,
Well,
In
and I
life and
mean,
work, you have to
speaking of
joke.
laugh, yes.
correct.
And you know what? Some of those jokes we all know may not be appropriate for the public to hear, but
Mm,
if that's your release too, as long as you're doing it with people that, can handle that too, that's
Hmm.
okay. You know, you just got to find the like minded people. And so,
Yes.
well, I definitely want to put out there um, the organization we were talking about earlier was NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
mhm.
That website is NAMI.org. Check it out. They've got information on everybody. You can look it up by state, then by county to find out where you can go for that. Um, Chris, what was your website again?
Sure, it's talk, the number two, endstigma.com. And that features resources as well as my personal email and my personal cell phone. It also has
Fantastic.
the video
Awesome.
of my story if you're interested in that. And
Have tissues nearby, guys.
I do warn everybody, it's not any other training. We're talking about feelings and we're talking about you. How are you doing? So I I I I'm well aware that it could cause some stir of emotions, and in some ways I'm glad that I'm getting through because I can finally see, okay, I'm touching some things there. The audience is listening to their heart, right?
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
self-checking, they're being self-aware. And it's not a training that, I mean, yes, you learn things, but I want you to absorb them. I want them to be part of who you are. How am I doing? And be truthful with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey,
Definitely
Chris.
do that check in.
Uh, Chris, I want to reach out to you after the podcast to see if you would like to come talk to a room full of animal control officers, just to kind of plant your seed and get your message out there to us. Um, at the Arizona State Association's annual training in Laughlin.
Count me
So,
in.
But I will definitely reach
But
out to you
absolutely.
after the podcast and kind of see where you're at with that and see what we can do.
I've talked to, it's a law enforcement theme, most certainly. But in the end of it, I think everybody sees, no, it's just about a human who went through something, and we're just talking to humans, right? Because behind that badge, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
So it's absolutely
Yes.
applicable. So I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that
Yeah,
invitation.
that's what I tell
and
people
I
too.
certainly hope to get out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people
Right.
there's a
We're all human
person
behind that
behind the badge.
Mm-hmm.
That has feelings and emotions. And
Mhm.
yeah, we're all wired differently, but we're all wired for connection. That's why we're on
Mhm.
this earth. So making those connections is kind of our safety web. So thank you for that
Right.
invitation, Jerry, and I look forward to talking to you. And
Awesome.
Ashley, thank you again for attending my
Yes.
presentation. And then I remember meeting you after class. You're like, I have to get you on this podcast. Love it.
Yes.
Love this. So to
I'm
all
glad
the
you
listeners,
were.
my honor.
I'm glad you were able to join us. I think this was a great episode, and I hope our listeners, check out your website, check out NAMI's website, and reach out to whomever they need to at their organization and get some of that training for themselves, for the citizens, and for their coworkers. It is worth it all the way around. So in the meantime, everybody, you again know, check us out. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, we're all there. Mine and Dan's numbers are in the show notes. If you need to talk to us, we're there. You can text us, you can call us. And as always, let's keep it humane.
Maine.
Love that.